cool. Gregor, again, thank you very much for coming on and chatting with me. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
One thing I was looking at your LinkedIn before we got on the call here, and I was struck by you've got some very well-known logos on your LinkedIn. You know, between working at BT, Channel 4, Financial Times, these are all like big brands, and that I would associate as kind of certainly the brand names as being sort of more traditional media. But it looks like you are working there in very kind of like new media capacities. I'd be really curious to know a little bit more about like what was it like working in these different places in this capacity, and yeah, what was the culture like, and what was our approach to building digital products, and what did you do there? I'd just be really curious to understand that story.
Yeah, sure. I mean, each of those organizations were on different points of their, digital transformation and digital maturity, whatever you want to call it. And I've experienced being in a large business that was, at the right at the start, the sort of the awakening, realizing that they need to do something. And I've been in one of those businesses was through a lot of the hard work, over the hurdle, and experiencing different new problems. So yeah, I think I've seen the full breadth, but they all are. You're right. They all are fairly traditional businesses. Less so Channel 4, but Channel 4 is not that old. But Financial Times, BT, certainly very heritage brands coming from a very traditional kind of safe heartland, but enormously under pressure to transform at some point. And each of those businesses had to go through that realization, go through that painful kind of change, and then deal with all the fallout after that change is complete. I think probably the one that I experienced most of, and the one that I played the biggest part in, was BT. I was very lucky, and BT is a great organization. I kind of grew up there in a lot of ways professionally, but I was at the right time. I was the right kind of person at the right kind of age at the right kind of time to be in a big organization in a position of relative influence, where I personally was an early adopter of the internet, a lover of the internet, a lover of digital products, all kind of e-commerce, all the things that the internet could do for me kind of individually. I was a teenager through the 90s. I was in all the chat rooms from the age of 12, 13, doing all that kind of stuff. And so it was sort of easy for me, I feel, in that culture to see the opportunities and to kind of know how to go about adopting this whole kind of digital opportunity. So social media, the products we needed to build, the services we wanted to provide, a lot of it was sort of came naturally to me. And so I found myself to, quite quickly find myself in, positions where I could really influence what this big business was going to do. And, it was fantastic. I got loads of opportunities, and I probably operated maybe above my pay grade or above my level of experience, really, because I was a voice that made sense, because I kind of knew this stuff inherently. I guess I was a digital native, is the term that used to be thrown around a lot, and that was great. It was just a fantastic opportunity for me. It was hard though. There was a lot of resistance. There was a lot of people who didn't get it. There was a lot of people who were like, come on, really, shut up. Seriously, is Twitter that important? A lot of that kind of attitude, definitely. But as time went on, these barriers sort of fell away, and I was stronger at communicating and influencing, etc. But yeah, I think it was, what was the culture like? There was a lot of resistance. There was a lot of old school thinking, but it was a pretty good organization, and they're a pretty hard nosed organization. BT especially. They if you made a good enough financial case, people would listen to you. What was harder initially was getting through more of the softer kind of experiential stuff. You need to create good websites that people enjoy using. Don't just ram advertising in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it took a while for people to get that stuff. So they got the commercial side first, and it took them a long time to realize that the experience was really part and parcel with the commercial performance. And then later it was the ways of working, the product thinking, all that kind of stuff that came. But yeah, I feel like I experienced the full spectrum of change there.
And so I was curious, what types of products were you building at BT? Obviously, you were there for quite a time. You were there for 9 years. Maybe,
Yeah.
some of the highlights, things that were most sort of interesting or impactful or,
Yeah.
stuck out in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it was about the change of the internet, and I really kind of presided over a lot of that. I was right at the heart of that. So when I first joined, my first real digital role was working on a portal. So, we don't even have portals anymore, but, Yahoo, MSN, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. This big company provides an email service, and attached to that, they provide a bunch of other digital tools, but most importantly, it was like a news hub. And with that came a lot of monetization, advertising, search, monetization. So the first product that I was involved in was building a search engine results page where we partnered with Google, and it was co-branded, and it was for essentially BT customers, and we provided them search results. It kind of seems weird now, but we'd have millions of users every day using this, and there was money to be made out of that. And then I built the advertising, and I optimized the advertising, so it was very commercial, but it's technical commercial. And
Yeah.
back then, having one foot in tech and another foot in commercial, like running a P&L, was very odd. Like no one really did that, and this isn't that
Yeah.
long ago. This is like 2012, 2013. Not many people did that sort of thing. Certainly not in businesses like BT. So
Yeah.
that was great, and I was the guy. I was the only one that did it. Me and a small team. That was fantastic. But then when BT bought BT Sport, there was this huge opportunity around app focused content and entertainment and video players and all sorts of fantasy league gaming and all that kind of stuff. So I was still in the commercial side, but I was part of the team that built and launched that app in a kind of a mad panic because it was a bit of a kind of a rushed window in between seasons to get that product out. But that was fantastic because that was a huge number of eyeballs. It was a really big thing, and at the time, BT was always a little bit behind the curve. Google, Apple, all these kind of businesses were, they were the cool digital businesses. The telcos were a bit behind, but BT Sport, that was the first time we actually had something in people's hands that they really wanted, and so that was cool. There was a lot of attention on it.
Yeah.
Um, and then what happened was, and I think a lot of businesses did this, but BT started to really proliferate digital stuff. So at the start, you get a lot of people scratching their heads going, do we really need this? What's the point? And then very quickly, everyone goes, oh my God, this is the future. And then they started creating a whole load of crap.
Okay.
Low
Just throwing
quality.
spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah, just low quality. I mean, and BT is a big business, right? So it's full of all these fiefdoms. So you got a lot of people who want to have their own little patch, and unfortunately, they were creating lots and lots and lots of disparate little digital patches. So loads of
Okay.
apps, loads of social media accounts, loads of websites, all completely uncontrolled. And I found myself in a role where we wanted to do a rebrand. So the new chief brand and marketing officer came in. He wanted to relaunch the BT brand. And one of the things he identified was that if we're going to do that, we need to sort out our digital estate because we're not doing it well and it's a mess. And so then that became my job, was how do I turn this business into something that cosmetically is a mature digital business, from in terms of like the digital touch points that customers experience. And so then I worked on that for a few years and was part of the core team doing that brand relaunch in 2019. So that was great. That was kind of, I was part of the growth of the digital thing, but then I was then part of the keeping a lid on it and making it, excellent rather than just loads of stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Putting some manners on it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then tell me a little bit about Channel 4. Obviously, like they haven't been around as long. I'm living in Dublin, so like, culturally, I think we have more influence. Channel 4 culturally would have an influence here more so than, say, some people that might be listening to us from, say, North America, for example.
Sure. Yeah.
We've got the app and, watch shows on there. How would you contrast your experience at Channel 4 compared to BT? Were they much more sort of on it in terms of, a cultural understanding of the internet?
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely. And one of the big things at BT was, they had the tech, they had the infrastructure, they had such a foothold in, the just a physical integration into people's lives. But one of the things they really struggled with was they've always struggled with is their identity and their branding and their tone of voice, and the big accumulation of that in the more internet enabled world is content and how you come across online. And BT's always struggled with that, and it's something I played a big part in trying to structure that, trying to give some kind of tone to our content and kind of control to it. And it's hard, it's hard for a pretty large, dry, very practical, faceless, telecommunications company to have a strong personality out there. Channel 4 was the complete opposite. Channel 4 is just pure personality because they're just a content business. I mean just a content business. They're a fantastic TV business, but they are a content business, right? They create fantastic content and they can do that so well. They're so
Yeah.
creative. So the exact opposite problem. Where they did struggle a bit more was things like, the technical side of things, infrastructure, investment, IT, marketing, technology, things like that, which is what I was there to help with. So, I mean, every business has got its strengths and its weaknesses, and Channel, it was a very,
Yeah.
it was a very, very different kind of culture. But they were pretty good, and they were generally speaking, they knew the internet. I mean, their social media team was absolutely fantastic, and they had unreal social engagement, like the kind of social engagement that a telco would absolutely kill for, because they're just producing wonderful stuff that people love spending their time, watching and talking about.
Yeah.
So they had a real, massively advantageous position when the internet came along. Channel 4 was in a massively advantageous position. Their youth entertainment with kind of irreverent, kind of tongue-in-cheek sort of tone of voice. I mean, it's the internet, right? It's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. And then tell me a little bit about your time at Financial Times. So how was sort of what did you go in to do there, and what was your experience like there?
So I joined as a group product manager. But really, a lot of my experience was having done a lot of the digital transformation stuff as part of the BT brand relaunch, and even my role at Channel 4. Something that I'd done a lot of was Martech, and investing in data infrastructure to enable more sophisticated marketing and personalization. And so the FT had a particular problem around this. They had
Okay.
gone through a digital transformation and they developed a really great product and technology organization, and they've got a great product oriented culture. Like they've really embraced that whole, big tech company product culture, which is great. And the app's great, and they produce some really good stuff, and they do all the right kind of. They do everything by the book. They've read all the Silicon Valley product group books, and they all work to that pretty well. But one thing they had done is they'd sort of neglected marketing, and this is pretty typical.
Okay.
Product organizations and marketing organizations don't often get on so well. And so you had a marketing team that was sort of languishing with it wasn't really getting anywhere. They didn't really feel like their product, this amazing product organization, was really helping them. So I came as this sort of bridge to develop a marketing technology strategy that worked hand in hand with their product and technology business. And yeah, that was really eye opening. I mean, a lot of it was down to that cultural divide. A lot of
Okay.
it wasn't necessarily the answers. It was just having someone who knew product, who could get marketing things done. Really.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, but to the hammer, the world is full of nails. And I think this is something you see quite commonly in different organizations that have different cultures, that they're used to solving problems in certain specific ways. The world is just full of nails, and they're trying to apply their hammer. And I kind of get that sense that maybe it's a bit of a theme of the different places that you've worked at, that like they're, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine there are places that have very strong and established cultures, and that brings with it strengths in terms of, they're good at what they're good at, but then when it comes to adopting something that's a new kind of take on something, that they're trying to bring, their hammer to a situation where maybe a screwdriver or, a Swiss Army knife might be more appropriate.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I use that phrase a lot as well. Yeah, you build an organization with a certain thing in mind because like at the FT, I think they put a lot of time and effort. Just before my time, they put a lot of time and effort into becoming a very product-oriented organization. But one of the downsides of a product-oriented organization is it has pretty low respect for marketing and traditional marketing, the value of it,
Yeah.
the sort of techniques, the approach, the type of people, the way they work. And they really kind of were muscling out marketing. Marketing was voice and importance was being challenged, I suppose. And there was a bit of, I suppose it was a bit of an oversteer of the move to product, I'd say. And there was a bit of a kind of readjustment that was needed. Businesses go through this sort of thing all the time. But definitely,
Yeah.
it was a byproduct of trying to force their way through that digital transformation and bringing in a lot of very product-orientated leaders to do that.
Yeah. And so that brings us to Guild, and looking at the previous places, certainly the three previous places you worked before, so BT, Channel 4, and Financial Times, and then to go into a startup like Guild, which has, I was looking at your LinkedIn, you had something like 24 employees. So that's a significant departure, from the previous places you've worked. How did you find your way into Guild? Maybe you can actually just tell us a little bit about, I guess, how Guild came to be, and then how did Gregor find his way into Guild?
So yeah, I mean, the story of how I got into Guild is, I think it's a story that really supports the purpose of Guild. So when I left BT, I was in a huge business. There's 115,000 people in BT. Maybe that's not huge to some people watching this, but it is a lot of people. And when you're in a company like that, especially for 9 years, there's a whole world, right? It's a whole kind of contained world. So a lot of like networking and connections and all that kind of stuff, it all happens sort of naturally, but it's all sort of contained within that world. I mean, I worked with suppliers a lot, but largely the people I knew professionally were BT people. And that wasn't just the case for me, it's the same for everyone else in BT, right? So I also, that's one point. So there's the sort of the network was very internal. The second point was that I thought when I did the BT rebrand, I mean, BT is one of the biggest brands in the UK, right? And when we changed that brand, that was a big deal to me. In fact, kind of funnily enough, BT changing its brand to the Piper, we used to have the red and blue Piper in the 80s, was the first rebrand that I actually remember as a kid. So to be part of changing that brand again was quite a big moment. I was like, whoa, I'm kind of, this is big, this is important, this will affect people. So anyway, I thought it was a really big deal. Yeah. So it was kind of my swan song. I was going to leave, and I knew, I'd spent a long time there, and I thought, oh God, I'm going to get institutionalized if I don't leave. So I decided to go out into the big bad world, and I completely got two things wrong. One of them was I know loads of people, and I've got a great network. And the other one is, this piece of work that I've done at BT is so massive that I'm going to get a job, no problem. People are going to be biting my hand off. Neither of those things were true. I left BT, and I was just really kind of struck at how I actually don't have a proper network at all. Once you leave BT, that whole internal BT network doesn't care about you anymore. And also the work that I did at BT was so internal to BT in a lot of ways, and it didn't actually have that big an effect on a lot of people, or as big as I thought anyway. It wasn't as impressive as I thought it would be. And so I sort of languished a bit. I got out there and I was like, oh, shit, this is a bit harder than I thought. Sorry, I'm probably not supposed to swear, but this is a bit harder than I thought. So there's a sort of a big penny that dropped for me, which was around networking and the importance of, making meaningful connections and, and putting proper effort into that and being a good, I don't know, citizen, a professional citizen, and helping people and, making, good relationships with people. So when I left BT, I started doing that a lot more. So while I was at Channel 4, while I was at FT, I was doing a lot of this in the background. And one of the people that I met very early on was Ashley Friedline, who's the founder of Guild. He brought me into an advisory board, which was for his previous business, e-consultancy. I was there as a sort of a digital expert, working at a big brand. And I really enjoyed this engagement. I met some really nice people there. I actually got my FT job through meeting someone there, which was great. So I started to realize, oh, hang on a minute, this networking thing, wow, this not only is this kind of feel good and it's a nice thing to do, but wow, it really does deliver. And so, that was just a big shift in my kind of mindset when it came to that sort of thing. And then actually,
your exposure to Guild was actually quite some time before you ended up working there, right?
Yeah. So Guild was the messaging platform that was used for that advisory board, and it was built by Ashley. So not only was he on this advisory board, but he'd actually provided the tool, and he was starting a business, and this was one of his first sort of customers, if you like, of using this tool, which was a group that he was already part of. So I was kind of going through this realization about how important networking is. I'm meeting a lot of people, including Ashley. I'm on this tool and I'm using it to meet people. And then he comes to me, maybe a year or so later, and says, like, what's your situation like? What do you think of Guild? So for me, it was, I'm always looking for something that's really meaningful and purposeful in my work. Previously, I targeted these big household institution brands because I felt like these brands really meant something. I felt like they really did something for the nation. They really affected people. It's not just commercial stuff. It's not just making money. They're household names, and they change people's lives. And that was one of the things I was really proud of in my career. I wanted to do something, though, that I was still looking for something purposeful, but I felt like I wanted to create something where there wasn't good enough solutions, and could really help people. So the whole networking thing and the opportunity to work on a nascent product and proposition that could really help people connect with people, network with people properly. LinkedIn's awful for networking. Most digital platforms are awful for networking. They're just there for advertising. And I really felt like, here's an opportunity here to actually make something that's really needed in the world, but also kind of right some wrongs as well. And so there felt like there was a big purposeful opportunity there. Also, like you said a couple of times, I worked at these big businesses doing similar sort of jobs, and I'm like, I want to be. I've spent a lot of time telling more senior people than me what they need to do, and I kind of felt like maybe I should be at the helm myself. Maybe I should be taking risks myself and being in a position where I can make some decisions myself. So there's opportunities to do that as well. And then there's kind of like, how does startup work? How do VCs work? How does investment work? How does all that work? So yeah, it was a great little package for me.
And how has that experience been, getting into the world of VC and startups, and contrasting that to working in an organization of 115,000 people or whatever BT is? Now you're working in this environment where you've got VCs and fundraising and building something not necessarily from the ground up, but comparatively speaking from the ground up, right? What's that contrast been like?
I mean, it's so great in terms of being able to get stuff done. I'm building and shipping, and I'm building at a pace and a throughput that I've never been able to do before. Previously, this isn't always the case, but sometimes it just takes years to get agreement to do something, whereas right now it takes minutes, and then the building and delivering takes weeks rather than years or months or whatever. So, the ability to get stuff done, the ability to just be nimble, to try things, test things, fail, learn, is just great. It's really great. And the ability to, to decide and not have to deal with a sort of resistant cultures where you're always kind of wondering, do people just not get it? Why doesn't anyone get it? That was a question that I used to kind of have all the time. Is it me that's wrong? Is this a commercially stupid thing to be pushing? Or do people just not understand that the internet has happened and they need to change? So to be speaking with a lot of like minds, working with a lot of smart people, getting stuff done, moving quickly, learning fast. I mean, for me, learning quickly is just brilliant. I'm also doing a million different things at once. You know, I'm the product lead, I'm the data lead, I'm building a data warehouse, I'm writing complex kind of algorithms, I'm doing visual design work, branding work, marketing work. You know, I'm kind of getting involved in everything, which is great as well. I kind of enjoy a lot of that. So yeah, it's great. It's everything I wanted it to be. Downsides, there's a lot of uncertainty. It's much more risky. You know, obviously, you know, most startups fail. It's hard to get attention. We don't have this huge brand that just gets people wanting to talk to you just because of who you work for.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's tougher, kind of having to seek that attention and seek kind of eyeballs on your product, and you know the stretch as well. You know, there's not a huge amount of headspace when you're having to do so many different things. You know, it's
Yeah.
busy. But yeah.
Breadth versus depth.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, I
Yeah.
love it, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. Like, Guild's great. I still believe in the platform. I still think it's a great product. It's doing well. I'd like it doing better, obviously, but no, I love it, and it's everything I wanted it to be. You know, I really I wanted the kind of the opposite of everything, and I wanted to learn a lot, and I wanted to fill a gap that I felt like I had in my CV. You know, I wanted, you know, for the future me to be able to go, you know what, I've done this and I've done that. You know, I've broadened my base. You know, think of your
Yeah.
career like, you know, if you want to get to the top of that pyramid, you know, the broader your base is, the better.
Yeah. And speaking of the product, maybe give us like a little bit of, you know, elevator pitch or longer in terms of, you know, what is Guild and who's it for and why should people care?
Sure. So Guild is it's a networking and community app for professionals. It's for anything from private networks of, you know, high value members, peers, customers, all the way up to, you know, large membership organizations who want to bring their members together. So it's a place to bring people together as professionals to, you know, connect, collaborate, you know, converse. It's a pretty simple product, and that's one of our USPs. It's very much came from I suppose the UX that was introduced by WhatsApp. This really simple. It's just messaging back and forth.
Okay.
It's really stripped back, but WhatsApp's not great for professionals. It's not great for work conversations with, you know, hundreds of people where there might be sensitive information going back and forth. So Guild it brings more structure, and it also has it's a very professional tone, more features, host features, and it also has an underlying network, so you can find other professionals and connect with them and join groups that they're in.
And who's your typical customer? You know, who's the one that's coming in and slapping down their credit card and setting up a community?
Yeah, so like I say, at the two ends of the spectrum at the moment. One of them is the kind of the private, like, professional networks. So we have a lot of private network organizations, you know, be it specialist event organizers or specialist B2B
Right.
marketers, and they like to have these kind of exclusive groups, often quite senior executives, NEDs, you know, alumni, things like that. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have a large membership organizations. So for example, we have the National Education Union, or a very large union with
Okay.
many teachers on the platform. We have quite a few medical associations where they have lots of members who, you know, pay a subscription to their membership, and as a value-added service, these businesses like to bring them together. And then there's lots of things in between. We've got thousands of professional communities on Guild.
Okay. It kind of reminds me of, I'm a member of a couple of organizations like this. Organization, I use the term lately, but like I'm a member of a Ruby on Rails developer Slack group. And it's just like a couple thousand Ruby on Rails developers in Slack, which is not particularly set up for that specific use case. It's someone's kind of jerry-rigged Slack into that use case. So if I understand correctly, you've purpose-built for that use case, you know, a group of people that are trying to come together and network around a particular topic, or they might be from a particular organization.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And you said, you know, what kind of people are coming in and slapping their credit card down? It's largely people who have created communities sort of accidentally using the wrong tool, be it Slack
Yeah.
because all the developers use Slack and they can't be bothered with another one,
Yeah.
or be it WhatsApp because everyone's got WhatsApp on their phone but they don't want it to be beside their conversations with their mum or their kids, or LinkedIn, and they've decided that LinkedIn isn't really looking after their group section anymore, or et cetera, et cetera. And they're coming to us saying, look, we know that this is really important to our business. We know that our business is built on this network, the online digital engagement that happens in between events, for example, or actually this kind of larger community. But we don't have the right platform, so we're looking for something that's purpose built. But
Yeah.
we don't want an all-in kind of desktop-based suite. We just want something that's straightforward, it's really chat focused, nice design, just the features you need.
Yeah. So before you'd mentioned that when you were having moved to Guild, that getting attention is much more challenging when you don't have the 800-pound gorilla that is the brand of BT, for example.
Yeah.
And so what have you found to be effective means of getting attention for Guild?
Well, tapping into different kind of wider communities. So one of the things that we've had a fair amount of success with at Guild is being a voice of community leaders. And so we run a number of communities ourselves, which are for community leaders, and our blog, a lot of it is about kind of supporting people who are running communities, giving them a lot of insight, strategy, help in how to run their communities. That's really the main thing, really, because when people are looking to start a community, communities are hard. Running professional communities is hard. And everyone comes to realize this at some point or other, and then when they realize it, they start to reach out for help, and they often reach out to experts, and those we like to be well known to those experts as a good tool, a good platform. And one of the things that community experts will do is they'll talk about what platforms you should be using for different types of needs. So that I think that's been really effective. I think also just having good brands on the platform, running great communities is really important, because other businesses look at their competitors or similar companies and they see what they're doing, and they can get inspiration from that. And a lot of our, I'll be honest, like a lot of our the business that we get comes through SEO. People are looking for looking for community platforms, and they're finding us. Because I think it's sort of a crowded market. Like there are quite a number of kind of various different community platforms, but none of them are the same. They all are slightly different. And Guild is much more. It has a niche around like quite simplistic, very conversationally focused, but definitely for professionals. And not many of the other platforms can say that. So yeah, we kind of cut through by just having a niche.
I have found what you're saying there in terms of running a community can be quite challenging. So I'm a member of, I think, maybe 3 different Slack groups. One is like a Ruby on Rails developer network. One is like a partnerships networking type organization.
Yeah.
And one thing I found is sometimes these communities can end up being a bit ghost town. If there's not someone kind of keeping things going and so forth.
Yeah.
What have you found? Is this a coaching exercise for you guys to educate your customers on best practice? And if that's the case, what are some tips or best practice for people who are trying to build a robust community and keeping it engaged?
Yeah, so it definitely is. We provide a lot of our blog really is just absolutely full of best practice and guides for different types of organizations and how they can run their communities. And so there's just a ton of wealth of knowledge in there. We also, like I said, we also run communities for community people. So, there's a huge amount of insight that comes from there as well, because they're learning and sharing all the time as well, which is fantastic. And we even do we provide various professional services as well around strategy, consulting, things like that, because we find that a lot of people really want it, and a lot of people are willing to pay for it, because it's like you say, it's hard. And people either know this before they start, or they very quickly realize that, oh God, this is a bit harder than I thought. But tips, I mean, annoyingly, it depends. It depends on what the community is really for. It depends on what people are likely to expect to get from the community. But generally speaking, there's always a percentage rule. I think it was a Yahoo employee that created this, 2, 10, 88 split of, does that add up? Of you have 2% contributors, 10% consumers, and 88% lurkers or whatever. It's a rule that follows through for pretty much any content platform. And guild communities are no different. And you always get a sort of a small group of highly engaged people within the community, a slightly larger group of people who are like always dipping in, and then this large group of what is not particularly affectionately termed as lurkers. We don't call them that, and we actually know that we've developed an engagement metric, and it really values those people, because we know that those people are actually, they're kind of engaged. They're just reading conversations is a form of engagement, and I've certainly gone to like in real life meetups from communities that I've sometimes regarded as being ghost towns, like you say, and I've turned up, and there's all these people that I didn't know were in the community, and they're all going on about how much they love it, and I'm like, but you've never said anything. I'm like, yeah, no, but I'm just not really the kind of person that says stuff, but I just love the conversations. Like, okay. Sure. So there's always an element of that. So one of the things we try to say to people is, just relax. It's not as bad as it looks. But also, I think setting expectations is quite good, and you can do that through rituals. So having like a weekly cycle is always quite handy. We've got video rooms in guilds, so we have a lot of communities that run, lunchtime kind of chats every Friday, or things like that. Or they'll have like, Monday, there'll always be a particular topic of conversation that's kind of repeated every week. These sorts of things, the sort of repetitive things, so people kind of know what to expect and they can kind of get used to these things. That's really great. But then also mixing up a little bit, bringing in different types of people, doing things like AMAs. Ask me anything's, fireside chat sort of things. You can do those sorts of things within the community as well. So kind of structuring a bit of a I suppose a
like programming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like a program calendar that like Channel 4 might have, or something like
that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's because people know what to expect, so people know why they're coming in. People know why they're going to revisit. People kind of, a lot of the hesitancy to contribute is just kind of not knowing what the rules are, not knowing what the social dynamics are and how to play in this space. So they just retreat. So making it easy for people to kind of understand how to engage is quite an important thing. Hosting, you speak to any community specialist and they'll tell you how important the host is, and you sort of said it yourself a minute ago. I'm always chasing this holy grail of a self-perpetuating community. I'd love to, create some, or maybe find the product kind of magic that can create self-perpetuating communities.
Community fusion.
Yeah, exactly, something like that. Yeah, some kind of perpetual motion. But the reality is that you do need a good host. It's just like being at a party. You need a good host. Some parties need the host to do more than others, right? And a lot of that depends on the dynamics. A lot of it depends on the chemistry. Sometimes it depends on the purpose. Why are these people brought together? Sometimes people make really bad decisions about this. They create a community based on like an identity. Like, for example, like, we're all marketers, let's all get into a community, and then it just falls flat because there's no actual reason to speak. Sometimes communities of purpose, or like a mission, or like a movement, they can be really great because everyone kind of understands why we're here, and they understand like the role that they can play in this movement. So having to think about what is going to kind of keep momentum in this community, what is the reason for it to exist that ensures that it will have momentum, is sort of an important thing to do. But at the same time, you can't sit in your hands. You just got to get going and do it. And so it's there's an element of throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, it reminds me of some not-for-profits that I've been involved in, and it's probably similar kind of ratios. There's a certain number of people, small number of people that are going to be really involved. They're going to be on the board. They'll chair different committees, and then there's a smaller number of people that will help volunteer with events or whatever, and then the rest of the people, they'll show up to the events and have the tea and cake and whatever. But it's probably very good advice there, just to understand those ratios and make sure that there's someone who's fulfilling, importantly, the 2% and 10%, because if there's not someone, if you're using the party analogy, making sure everyone has a drink or whatever, then the party's gonna kind of fall apart.
Yeah, but sometimes, you can be clever at a party, and you can, put a little sign up that says help yourself to drinks, and you lay them all out.
Yeah.
There's stretching the analogy, obviously, but it depends on the community, it depends on what it is you're trying to achieve, but there are definitely
Yeah.
ways in which you can help people understand how to be a good member of this community or network. Encourage people to do the right kind of behaviors that are going to ensure that you have as many initiators and contributors as possible. So that's how we split them. We have initiators, that's the smallest percentage. Contributors, the people who are more vocal and likely to, respond, answer questions, all that kind of stuff. And then you have the consumers. So I don't call them lurkers, I call them consumers because they're consuming the
Yeah.
thing, but they're not really putting anything back in. And
Yeah.
it's having to think about, what kind of things can you put in place to get the kind of ratios that you're going to be happy with.
Yeah. Cool. And so what's next? What's next for Guild that you can kind of publicly talk about?
Well, we've got a couple of, we've got a few ideas of where we want to go. Some of them are quite natural things. At the moment, we sort of have a two-sided model, growth model. One of them is, we like to, our business model is based on businesses paying for these spaces to bring their members in, right? That's where we make money. There's no advertising. We don't sell the data, so we make money by people paying for these kind of exclusive spaces. But it is a network product, and you can find, there's a directory, you can find other communities. So as a normal user,
Interesting.
you can be invited into a private network, but you can also join other groups.
Interesting.
On Guild. So, I would definitely like the average user, and most of our users do, to have a handful of communities or networks that they're part of in Guild. And it's a great way of, discovering these things and doing networking via communities and things like that. So because it's a network product, we sell to businesses, and it's great having all these good brands on here, and they pay the bills and all that, and it looks after their bottom line. But really, my aspirations are about complementing that with a more kind of ground up growth of just people who just want to try community, and they don't have a big business, they don't have a big brand, or maybe they're a really small business, or maybe they're just a startup or whatever, but they want to just try this, and they create a community out of, from a free account on Guild, and they can grow things from that. So we've got a great story. There's a with the Chat GPT boom earlier in the year, there was one guy that was part of another community that I was in, and he said, "Oh, we should really have an AI community on Guild. Why don't we have one?" And I just said to him, "Well, why don't you go and join? Why don't you go make one?" So we created it, and now he's got about 200 senior professionals in this community. They have, just thriving conversation. It's a really good community.
Wow.
But he's actually created a new business now as an AI kind of consultant around this. So that's just it's just, for me, that's just a brilliant story of someone who's just taken a tool that we've given him, that we've allowed him to use for free. He started building a community, and he's actually kind of changed his professional life around that.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of stuff that I love, and that's the kind of stuff that I want to enable. And the business model there could involve, micropayments, charge, £1 a month or 50p a month or whatever to be part of this community. And then, that can be a career, or it could be a side hustle, or it could be, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff. And doing that at scale, I'd love to complement our existing business model with that. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Cool. Well, Gregor, thank you very much for chatting with me. I appreciate you coming on, giving us your time. And yeah, thanks and all the best.
You're welcome. It's good to chat. Thanks, Emmett.